Hi, I'm Robert Moynihan in Rome, Italy, and I'm with Father Murr in southern Spain on Wednesday, April 23rd. And 2 days ago, Pope Francis died, and I was already in Rome last week and saw Pope Francis on the vigil eve of Easter, just before the vigil mass. And Father, we have the death of Pope Francis. Now we have the funeral on Saturday, and we have the church already thinking about the conclave coming and the next pope. How are you doing in Spain?
I'm doing wonderfully. Life is good, and these are exciting times, I find.
So I guess I wanted to start by chronologically by saying I was up in Assisi and I was in Norcia and I came down to Rome, and we didn't really expect to see Pope Francis, but we went in very early with 17 pilgrims, including 5 children in one family, where the parents brought their 5 children, and they've been the most extraordinary pilgrims. And they're singing in Latin, and they are all very running around quite a bit, but
Good. Being normal kids.
yeah, it's been an extraordinary experience. We met the Bishop of Assisi, and we met the monks in Norcia. We met Father Cashin, and we met Abbot Benedict. We had the Holy Thursday liturgy there and the Good Friday, and we came down to Rome on Saturday morning. And we got to Rome about 3 o'clock after stopping at an auto grill. And then we basically walked right into the Vatican about 4 o'clock, stood in line for a little while. And just after 5, we were probably the first people in. And we had special tickets, which one cardinal had kindly provided. And we walked down the left side of the basilica to the very back and into those seats on the side of the altar. And I said, let's stand by the aisle and sit by the aisle. If people come in, cardinals come in, we can say hello if an American cardinal is here. And the basilica slowly filled up. And then just about 5:30, we heard some clapping over on the other side near the Pietà, in the very back of the basilica. And I said, that's unusual. There were probably just 200 or 300 people in the basilica now, and because the liturgy was at 7:30. And then halfway down the aisle, where there's the Adoration Chapel on the right side in St. Peter's Basilica, there was those people started to clap. I said, that's got to be the Pope. And then I looked up and I saw a white cap. I said, the Pope is coming, Francis. And I said, kids, he's going to have to probably come out here on this side to go out the back door right past us. So he turned in his stroller and he came in front of the main altar of St. Peter's Basilica. And it was about 5:40. And it was Holy Saturday, St. Peter's Basilica, and stopped, and the people pushing the chair stopped and left him about 20 feet in front of the altar, right in front of a statue of the Virgin Mary. And then he bowed in his head in prayer. And I thought, it's remarkable that he's come in and that he's praying, and he's not just lying in his bed after have been in 5 weeks in the hospital. I said, maybe he's getting a little better. And he spent about 8 minutes in prayer and then nodded. And Katie, do we have a video of this that one of our pilgrims took, or maybe I took? Could we play that? He came towards us and he stopped right by us, 3 feet away. And I take it somehow as a farewell. I've seen him and talked to him many times. I had no idea that I would see him. we play that? So, oh, that's us walking in. That's him coming over. And he told one of the guys to give us 3 candies for the 3 of the children, and 3 lemon candies. And they were so delighted and happy. And then he went out the back door, and they backed up the wheelchair, and he went out. He went back to the Domus maybe nearly 6 o'clock. And in the next morning, he came out in St. Peter's Square, and he spoke just a few words from the loggia of St. Peter's Basilica on Easter Sunday at noon. And that evening, I believe he already fell into a coma at about 7 o'clock on the evening of Easter Sunday. And in the next morning, and the doctors came and they said he can't recover. And his vital signs have passed. And they gave the date and the hour of death at 7:35 on Easter Monday morning. So we saw him just a few hours before his death. So I'm speaking partly just in personal terms, not about all that he said and did in his pontificate and all the agendas and all the confusion. I'm just talking about a man who passed from this world, and I happen to know him. I appreciated some things about him. I wrote a little note in a letter, but he passed away, and it was unexpected because I thought he was getting better. Father?
What can I say to that?
Well, anything you want. We can carry forward from that beginning.
All right. Well, there you are. When I got the news that he died, it was early in the morning. I had 2 visitors from the United States, one of them a priest, and we went immediately into. They were leaving. I went back to the chapel and said prayers and said a requiem mass in Latin for him, for his soul. And I've got to tell you, I heard some commentaries later on the news and the internet, and one of the speakers said this tragedy. He referred to the Pope's death as a tragedy, and I said, "What tragedy? This is not a tragedy. It's not a tragedy at all. A man who's 88 years old and who has suffered that. I went through that kind of suffering, and I saw it firsthand with my own mother. She died that way, not being able to breathe, almost of suffocation. It's a terrible death. It's a terrible death.
Yeah.
So in a real way, it's a blessing. Besides, 88 years is a very good run, for a life. And I've got to say, quite honestly, I didn't feel a tragedy at all. I felt, you'll pardon me for saying so, but I felt relief. Because I felt that it's enough now. That was 12 years. They were difficult years. Maybe not as much for you as for me, Robert, because I have lots of people who contact me and were very upset, to put it lightly, during this pontificate, and they needed encouragement. There were people who were upset. There were people who were angry. There were people who were ready to leave the church over the confusion that they were seeing, heresy everywhere, this, that, and the other thing. And so it cost me a lot. I'm not saying poor me. I'm not doing that. But it cost me a lot to keep my own cool and try to simmer people down a lot, and to help them see the brighter side, the positive side. the hopeful side, let me put it that way, the hopeful side of all of this, because I really believe that out of all of this, good is going to come. I really believe that. Out of the chaos, good is going to come. And perhaps we even needed a Francis to bring it to this point. And I think something else is going to happen. I think that the new Pope, whoever he is going to have to call some sort of a council, really, truly, to straighten things out, to make things understandable again, to make things Catholic again in the sense of universally understood. So I think a lot of good is going to come now, and perhaps the pontificate of Francis was even necessary to bring it to this point. Who knows? But we'll find that out on Judgment Day, our own Judgment Day too. But it's I'm hopeful and I'm relieved. But I don't see tragedy.
Well, your remarks are very, I echo your remarks. You know, I have a long-standing friendship with Archbishop Vigano, and Archbishop Vigano finally completely denounced Pope Francis.
Yes.
And he asked me to show the courage also to do the same. And I said, this will be so destabilizing to the church. Let's think this over. He said, no, let's take the courageous and true step that so much evil is compromising the purity of the doctrine. And we can't allow that. That's why people are confused. They think the worldly attitudes are coming in. And the Pope has somehow fallen into this mistake, whether just without realizing it or actually with evil intent. And I said, I just think the situation will cause rejoicing in the world as people will see this church shattering in its structure right in front of us. And an essential pivot point of that is the papacy itself, the unity point, and therefore we will institutionally commit harikari. And then within a short time, the Vatican decided that the attitudes of Archbishop Vigano were so acerbic and denunciatory that they excommunicated him for not keeping in union with the Supreme Pontiff. And this has created a situation where, according to church law, the excommunicate is actually supposed to be recovered by no longer being treated as a friendly member and warmly invited as in the past. So I have been wondering now if this excommunication might be lifted because it was specifically related to not being obedient and recognizing Pope Francis. But we do have,
it could be. Excommunication is looked at today as medicinal.
yeah.
Right? It's not you're going to hell and that's all there is to it. It's a way to call people back. At least that's the way it's presented. I was invited many times during these 12 years, especially, to leave the church. Many times by different groups and by different people. Come with us, sede vacantis, this, that, and the other thing. I said, no. First of all, I don't buy the program, and secondly, I'm not going anywhere. This is my church. I'm staying right where I am. The church can leave me if it wants, but I'm not leaving the church. Mm-hmm. I'm staying right here. I'm staying right here because this is where we should be, and this is where we should continue to be to continue the fight for truth, for purity, for understanding, for compassion, for mercy, for everything that people need. We stay right where we are. And this is where you and I are trying. We're trying to do good. We're trying to remain faithful to the church, faithful to her message, and faithful to the truth that is her 2,000 years of teaching.
Yeah,
But
and
you and I aren't going anywhere.
right. No, and just to be clear, that truth is the gospel itself, which is the
Yes.
incarnation of Jesus Christ in a fallen humanity. I would say the 3 points. Humanity is in the image of God. Human beings are imago Dei, image of God. Therefore, we have a slight detachment from the rest of nature, and we are an intermediary being in between earthly and heavenly reality. But we have fallen in some way from a primeval disaster. We call it the fall of man. And therefore, we're marred from what our true nature ought to be. And even our emotions and our intellect are darkened. And that needed to be healed. So we are in a third factor. We are in the image of God, but we are marred, but we are redeemed. And the redemption occurred in very specific historical events. And those events are proclaimed as the gospel of our healing and our reopening to life, reopening to holiness, reopening to hope. And those events occurred and concluded with Easter, just 1,994 years ago, as I understand it. And which was 3 days ago. Easter was again celebrated. And the Pope was there in the square as the successor of Peter, the leading disciple of the Savior. And he's preaching again that we should return to the example of the Savior, that we should love the poor, we should not be cruel, that we should not forget those who are lonely and who are in need. This is the great message that Francis proclaimed, but that this message is a unique message of salvation. It's not the same as the things that are doctrinal points. These are the things that perhaps were obscured a little bit and were emphasized by men like Archbishop Vigano in all these years. And so now he passed away on Monday morning. It's Wednesday night. His body was just brought over. I watched the body come from the Doma Santa Marta where he lived. Yesterday he was in the chapel in the Doma Santa Marta, which is a chapel dominated by the prayer to the Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of thy faithful, are the words in the front of the chapel. I've been with the Pope in that chapel many times, and on 2 occasions alone with him in prayer. And once with my 2 sons with me. And the 4 of us were there. There were no guards and no vigilance. And he was praying and we were praying. But yeah, he was moved from there in a box. He was brought into the square. The crowd was maybe 25,000 people. They brought him up the front steps of the basilica and brought him in. And Cardinal Farrell, who was born in Ireland but is an American, he was the Bishop of Dallas, and I know Cardinal Farrell. He celebrated. He's the Camerlengo now, the Chamberlain.
Yeah, he was in all of his glory and vested in Pope Benedict's robes. Did you see that the vestments were Pope Benedict's? Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
And
little detail.
Yeah, and so already I'd say something like 20 or 25,000 or 30,000 people, maybe more, have filed in and they can see the body. Do we have a picture of how that looks, Katie? He's in St. Peter's Basilica. In his mortal remains are in St. Peter's Basilica. His spirit has departed. And he'll remain there till midnight. They may open it longer because there does seem to be a certain interest. And John Paul II, of course, it was April also. John Paul II died on April 2nd. Pope Francis died on April 20th.
A little bit different. John Paul II, I was there. He had about 5 million people.
Exactly. Yeah.
A little bit of a difference. It's absolutely true. Yeah. So he'll be there tomorrow and Friday, and Saturday morning will be the
the funeral mass, and Donald Trump will be coming over.
Yes. Yes.
So
He's a
they
big
had
man. He's a big man. I
Yeah.
thought that was a noble gesture on his part, because he could easily have sent over the vice president again. But
and he's not a man with
there's no question that there was bad blood between them. But he showed himself to be the bigger man. I think that's good.
he is taking a long trip to be present at the funeral of a man who said that at one time that actions that he had taken were not those of a Christian.
That's right.
Or
Also, Donald Trump ordered all of the flags in the United States, in every state and in the federal areas, to be put at half mast.
yeah, and the fact that Vice President J.D. Vance was here and he was around town. He was earlier on Holy Saturday, in the same morning. He was there with his family, and he saw the Pope. And of course, the Pope was so tired.
He saw him on Easter Sunday.
Easter Sunday morning, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And
that's good.
and
But I mean, it's a fitting tribute, and I think Trump should be congratulated for that, because he didn't hold. Donald Trump. There's something funny. People have all sorts of strange ideas about him, but he's not a man who holds grudges. He's simply not. He never was. He never did business that way, and he has quite a few enemies. But in New York, he was famous for sitting down with people he didn't like and talking to them reasonably. I mean, this is the way he is. So I credit him with that, and think that's pretty neat.
Well, years ago, and we're trying to grapple with also whether this was providential in some way, and I tend to believe everything that is occurring can have or be seen in a providential light, even if something goes wrong. Something good that you never expected will come out of it. And a lot of cards have been placed on the table in these 12 years. We kind of know who people are. There's a kind of cleansing in that very fact.
That's true. That's true. That's true. You know who people are and what they think, and what their opinions are, and what they hold the faith to be.
Yeah. And there was a book about 30 years ago, I think it was Father John Newhouse, The Catholic Moment. But I'm fascinated that J.D. Vance is a Catholic convert, and Trump's wife, Melania, is a Catholic from Slovenia, and Trump is coming to the funeral, and the ambassador that he's assigned to come to the Vatican, Brian Birch, is a very fervent Catholic. And the church has been kind of staggered a bit by the culture wars and the tremendous pressures placed by Hollywood and the universities and the Supreme Court justices. But this kind of Trumpian resistance may now find itself crisscrossing with a desire in the church itself to return, in a sense, to the apostolic communion with all of our saints.
I believe that the pontificate of Francis did that very well. I think the pontificate of Francis has brought us to a point where we have to do something. He's forced the issue. All of these things existed: the lack of faith, the contradictions in faith, the attacks on the faith, the heresies in the faith. These have been existent for 50 years. For 50 years, I haven't heard anything new as far as errors are concerned for 50 years. I've been hearing the same thing. Well, they came to a head in these last 12, and I think that's maybe what was absolutely necessary. I'm trying to be positive. I think that's what might have been necessary, and I think it's going to influence the election of the next pope very much toward order. And I don't think that people should be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the new pope, whoever he is, calls a council, calls another council. I mean that. I'm very serious. I told this, I was repeating this to someone just the other day. I remember Cardinal Gagnon and I were driving up the coast, the East Coast, up to Quebec. And I said to him, Your Eminence, wouldn't it be good for the Pope to call a third Vatican Council? Just to go over the things of the Second Vatican Council and to clarify them. And his answer, he laughed. You remember his laugh. He said, and you would give those scoundrels another opportunity to destroy what they didn't destroy in the last council? That was his idea of it, because he knew that things had gone terribly wrong. One thing that bothers me a lot, speaking of Cardinal Gagnon, is just sparked something else. The Freemasons of Italy, the Grand Lodge of Freemasons, have praised Pope Francis to the hilt.
Yeah, they issued a statement yesterday.
That gives me pause. I don't that the Freemasons would praise a pope says a lot. Says a lot.
They were referring to his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, we are all brothers. Fratelli means brothers. And they said, well, our great principle is brotherhood.
Equality, fraternity, liberty. Yeah.
Fraternité, égalité, et liberté. From the French Revolution. And they were saying, well, they were so grateful that Francis extended his appreciation of these qualities in that encyclical, and that he showed himself willing to be in dialogue with the Freemasons. And they issued a statement here in Italy to that effect. And they thought they were being nice, but it was very sort of terrifying to us.
Yes, it was. It is terrifying. It is terrifying. And I'm sure that they knew that. These are not naive businessmen.
One such man once said to me, I don't mind thinking of Jesus as my brother, but I don't like thinking of God as my father.
Oh, there you go. That says a lot. They are their own religion. But I just found it. I remember the words of our Lord, and I've always kept them close to my heart. They said, if the world hates you, remember the world hated me first. And to be hated by the world is a sign of a real Christian. To be loved by the world, not so much.
Yeah. Well, we mentioned that we're going to have an election of a new pope. And one cab driver today said to me, all these cardinals and all these heads of Roman offices, but also the doctors themselves, were trying to keep the Pope alive, because as soon as the Pope dies, their titles are taken away. They have no offices, including the Secretary of State and the head of every dicastery. It's all removed. Only one man keeps his job, and that's Cardinal Farrell as the Camerlengo, which means chamberlain. In a court, the king has a chamberlain who handles all of the affairs, busy affairs of people coming and going. The king dies, and the chamberlain remains to carry out the affairs until the next king is elected. The Camerlengo is the assistant of the Pope during his papacy, but he takes control. He's running the Vatican now, and it's Cardinal Farrell. And I think we have a little video. I saw Cardinal Farrell this morning, and there's a video we took as they came walking with the coffin of the Pope from the Dom Santa Marta down through the Arch of the Bells, and then across and then up the stairs of St. Peter's Basilica and into the Basilica. And we have some of the other cardinals in the procession. There were about 300-400 people that came from Dom Santa Marta with the coffin. Are you able to find that? Let's see. Well, it was a beautiful morning in Rome. It wasn't really hot. It was sunny, but it was cool. And toward the end of April, And May is always beautiful in Rome. May and October, wouldn't you say, are the most beautiful months in
Absolutely,
Rome?
absolutely. May and October, and then November. You know why November? Because November turns cold, it turns sunless, it's dark, and it is the absolute fitting month to remember the dead.
Yeah.
With All Saints and All
Yeah.
Souls Day. It really is beautiful.
I mean, Rome,
But spring, I think there's no more beautiful place in the world than April and May in
Yeah.
Rome. It just isn't.
the air was fresh today, and I do have some deep love of and appreciation for the opportunity to be in this city, and
Yes.
kind of, yeah. So, are we able to find that video? Okay. The one of the cardinals who walked by in front of me was Cardinal Becciu, and I know
Hmm.
Becciu, and I've been talking to him.
He's not a happy man today.
Oh, wait. Why do you say that?
Because he was told he can't vote.
Yeah, but I don't think it's finished. Becciu
really?
made an appeal. He made an appeal yesterday saying that the official sort of motu proprio taking the vote away from him was never published. And it's on the list in the press office, Becciu non-voter, but that's the press office list. It's not actually a papal motu proprio. And he said, therefore, it's never been published. The Pope has now passed away, and therefore I should vote.
I see. Okay. Then there isn't a problem.
Well,
there is.
I think it must have been the little group that the Camerlengo Cardinal Farrell has established to organize the next meetings of cardinals as a little committee. And I think the committee announced that on the first day when the cardinals meet in the pre-conclave gatherings, they'll take a vote on whether to let Becciu come in and have a vote. But there's also evidence in some ways that the entire trial of Cardinal Becciu did have some aspects to it which were not judicially appropriate. That maybe
From what I hear, most of the trials that took place in the Vatican are that way.
Yeah.
There's very little respect for law and for order, and there were all sorts of interventions by Pope Francis to change this, to do that. But it was very odd, the trial process in these things. Because when you have a trial, you don't have somebody else intervening and changing personnel and things. It was disconcerting. Anyway,
well, the Pope intervened and changed 4 laws of how the Vatican judicial proceedings function during the course of the trial.
But Robert, my question is, who does that during a trial?
This is why the Vatican, in some ways, is a mystery, and I'm too.
Mystery, you were all right.
Yeah. Well, you were mystified in the 70s when you arrived, and you've spent a lifetime, and there are still things that surprise you.
Somehow they don't. No, I wouldn't say that. I'm not surprised. It doesn't surprise me. It's the way things are.
So
it's
what's
shocking.
the explanation?
Well, because here the explanation is you have an absolute monarch. That's the explanation.
Yeah,
it's very simple. And the reason that the Holy See has existed for 2,000 years is because we have an absolute monarch. Right. It's also the reason it existed because we don't have the inbreeding of a line of succession. Your son and then his son, and this one is married to that one, and that one is married to the other. We don't have that. Every pope is a new man. He's a new absolute. He's a new absolute monarch, which is unique, I think, to the history of the world.
Yeah, and quite a few people in Rome now are wondering if they'll be called back. That's for sure. So
I hope a lot of them are not.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of things about behavior which would be shameful in terms of incompetence, bad decisions, that in a company or in a family, you'd say, we've got to shape things up uh, comrades or brothers and sisters, or the roof is going to cave in and the pots and pans are going to fill up in the sink. Some things have not been run quite the way they ought to have been, and including some doctrinal matters. And if the next pope who comes in is a solid person, there could be a clean sweep.
There's a way to do it. There really is a way to do it. You can have cardinals as heads of all of these things, but not have them do the work. I mean, get competent people who know what they're doing. This is when they were talking about the Vatican Bank. I remember years ago saying, why in the world don't they have lay people running the bank? Why don't they have people with business experience, with banking experience, international banking experience? Why? Why in the world would you put an archbishop in such a position? I mean, he's not an expert in that. This is where a lot of change has to take place. It really does. It still hasn't taken place, but there's a need to clean up things. I'm certainly hopeful that the new man will address all of these things really and start listening to some practical and good advice by sound people. Yeah.
So in some ways, it's almost a housekeeping issue.
It is a housekeeping issue. It's exactly called cleaning house, cleaning home. Yeah. Home. What do they call it? House cleaning? Spring house cleaning. You're in spring. Perfect time to begin.
Okay, so Saturday is the 26th. That'll be the funeral. It'll be in St. Peter's Basilica, but then the body will not remain. It will not stay. And
where is he being married and where is he being buried?
St. Mary Major.
Yes, where?
Right next to in a niche in between the chapel there in the upper left corner for the Salus Romani Populi.
But not in the Borghese Chapel, right?
No, just in the niche between that chapel and the Sforza Chapel next door. And I just was there today, and they're preparing it.
Good.
So he'll be over at St. Mary Major, and the fact that he prayed in front of the Virgin Mary on the eve of Easter, and that he chose to be buried there, and I think he's only going to have Franciscus on as an inscription. I don't think there's even any mention of him being Pope. It's the simplest.
Interesting.
I can't really. I'll allow everyone else to interpret it how they wish, but it kind of makes you take your breath away a little bit, because he's not leaving much of a trace. Franciscus is all it's going to say.
Yeah, well.
But I read an interesting thing on 1 Peter 5, where there was a nice essay written by the editor who said he asked his confessor, how can I be charitable to Pope Francis? And his confessor said, well, remember, it's possible that he will be in a much higher place in heaven than you. He could make a final confession and be completely forgiven for all the sins and have a pure heart and go to the Lord. And so the writer of this article said, and he kind of sketches in his article how that may have happened in the last hours of the Pope's life. And we can't say it didn't happen. So
do you hear me saying that it didn't happen?
No.
I hope not. No, I'm not saying that. Anything can happen. I've seen some marvelous things happen. Marvelous things happen at the end of people's lives. Normally not. Those who don't want to have their confession heard and don't want to receive the sacraments and don't want to know anything about God, that's the way they want to die. They die, but they die not happy deaths. And I've seen people make deathbed conversions, and they're sincere. Anyway, yes,
all I can say is that I am a personal witness to the Pope on the Holy Saturday Eve coming into St. Peter's Basilica, where he hadn't been too much for weeks, and spending 8 or 10 minutes in silent prayer in front of the altar, in front of the Virgin, and then dying a few hours later. I don't have any judgment of that. I just witnessed to it.
Very good.
All
That's
right.
wonderful. Good.
So Saturday comes the 26th, and a few more days the cardinals gather. I think the word is the May 5th. They'll start having the congregations. And I think it's 3 days, 6th and 7th. And I'm not sure if they might begin voting on the 8th, or it might be a little longer. It might be the 10th. And then they would vote. And if it's a 1 or 2 day conclave, we might have a pope, successor to Pope Francis, on the 10th, 11th, 12th of May.
Be very good. The 13th is my anniversary to priesthood, 13th of May. That would be a wonderful, the Feast of Our Lady of Fatima would be a great time to have a new pope elected.
Yeah. So we could go through, you told me before the program that if we declare our hope for any single name, then that would be a bad thing because some people might choose to take that as an indication that person must be stopped.
Yes, because that's the way these things go. You've been around and you know Vatican politics better than I. You know that that's the way they go. I know that. There are all sorts of elements, and you've got to remember that all of these men are human, and they are going to invoke the help of the Holy Spirit, but that doesn't mean they're going to receive it.
Yeah.
That's a different direction. Yeah, but I think they're going to come up with, whoever it is going to be a man who has got to be strong. Has got to be strong.
Okay, so that's our first principle.
Yeah.
And the strength may not be physical, but it's got to be.
He's got to have some stamina that's going to take him. He's going to have automatic enemies, whichever camp he's in, whichever way he is. Doesn't matter who it is and what he thinks. He's going to have some very ferocious enemies right from the start. So he's got to be a strong man to pull everything together. The church has never been, I don't believe, in such pieces. We really are in pieces. It's fallen into pieces, and somebody has got to put it back together. Someone can do that with the grace of God. It can be done, but it takes a very special man. We've had a few popes in the history, in our 2,000-year history, who have merited the title great. And those popes were great because they brought unity and no nonsense to an afflicted church. Created unity. So it can be done. It has been done.
So let's talk about characteristics. The issues might first be Italian or non-Italian. What would be the calculation there?
I think it's going to be a non-Italian. Well, I don't know. There are a couple Italian candidates also, but I think the way the world is going today and the way communications are today, we're no longer bound by that parochial idea that it has to be an Italian because it's very Roman thing. And I remember actually Cardinal Ratzinger himself, when he was a bishop, wrote a paper saying that the Pope should be Italian.
Yeah,
I remember reading it because he had to be the Bishop of Rome, right? And he should be Italian. But I think we're past that, and I think the universality of the church comes into play and into view much more beautifully when the Pope is from elsewhere. Okay. And you know what? Let me just throw a flower to the Italians. Because the Italians are marvelous people. They really are. They are marvelous people. And they put up with so much. People don't know how much they put up with, especially with all of us non-Italians being in their cities and taking over everything and not speaking the language and not knowing what a fettuccine from rigatoni. But they have a great deal of patience for all of us. And also, when Pope John Paul II was elected, there were no one was upset that he was Polish and not Italian. No one. All of the Italians were well, let's see how this goes. They were open to it. So I think those days are past, and I think the universality of the church is important. Is important, and this is one thing that Pope Francis did. What he wanted to do anyway was, I think it was his intention. His intentions are very difficult to surmise most of the time, but I think what he wanted to do was get the church everywhere, all over the world, in the representation in the cardinals, the representation of cardinals. That in the conclave, the church universal be really present, and that's what he's done. Now the problem with that is, as you know very well, Robert, that all of these men are going to get together. They don't know one another. That's the problem with it. When you make a cardinal in Timbuktu and another one in Cucamonga and this and the other, they don't know each other. Some of these men are going to meet for the first time.
Right.
We think this is a good organization. They know each other. They don't know each other. And certainly, even if they do know each other, they don't know each other's theology and stance on particular matters. So it's an encounter. It's a time for them to get to know each other and to figure out who's going to be the candidate. The dynamics really are marvelous. They really are marvelous, because it's not like any place else in any other election. You can't have a stalemate here. Someone has to be elected. And
that's why
sooner or later he will be.
Yeah, that's actually the meaning of conclave. The clave is key, con is with a key, so they lock the door. Conclave with a key.
And there have been times in the history when they did take a little bit too long. The Romans, on one occasion, I think didn't they break the roof off, the tiles of the roof off, and on another occasion they took away their food. Until they voted, right? That'll get them moving.
Force them to come to a final vote and elect somebody.
Yes. Yeah. It's a good idea. It works. Whatever works.
Yeah. And the question of age. There's someone just said to me today, well, they loved the energy of John Paul II. He was 58 years old, and he had that style and energy to say, be not afraid, open your hearts to Christ. And the world was rejoicing that the figure of the Pope was not in a wheelchair and was not weak, and they could discuss issues and talk to young people and inspire them. So go to a man who's 58, 60, 62, and not have someone who's 75, 80. But the advantage of the older Pope is he doesn't rule for 27 years, as John Paul II did. So the argument is made, choose someone who's in his 70s and can be still quite active for 5 or 10 years, but won't be kind of, the joke is we want to have a holy father, but not an eternal father.
Well said. Yes. A holy father, not an eternal father. Right. We already have that. We already have one.
So the decisions that they're thinking about, what does the church need? And they need a man who's strong and a man who can deal with running the Roman Curia, the government of the church. Possibly that could be an Italian who's familiar with how Rome works, how Italy works. But possibly now it's so international that someone, of course, they could bring in an Italian if they're from wherever, Asia, Africa, or America. They could bring in an Italian as their right-hand man or as 5 of their right-hand men.
Yes,
but they could guide the church without being Italian.
Their finances, the Vatican finances, are of utmost concern because they can't continue the way they're continuing. Yeah. They have to get order there because they run the risk seriously of going bankrupt. People don't understand what it costs just to keep the Vatican museums going. People have no idea what that, just the Vatican museums and the archives that have to be under air conditioned conditions of all of the books and the parchments and everything else. And it's an extremely costly thing. And their revenue, their income is simply the Vatican museums. That's it. That's what they're running the entire thing on. So somebody's got to get in there. Somebody's got to get in there and make sense of the whole economy of the Vatican and make it run, because they can't every other year be asking people to give money to bail them out. That's nonsense.
They do have other income, Father. They have many properties which throw off either a certain rent or a certain profit in major cities like Rome, first of all, but also Paris and London. Of course, that London property, it was traditional for them to look in those three places for properties that would rise in value.
Yeah.
And
just get somebody who knows what he's doing, or she, he or she knows what he or she is doing. To run the finances, you need somebody very competent. We have not had it. We've not had it. When the Freemasons announced, they took the decision in the 1970s, 75 or so, to bankrupt the Vatican Bank, to bankrupt the Vatican. That's exactly what they did. They counted on the lack of expertise in running the Vatican to be able to do that. And they almost accomplished it. Were it not for Cardinal Kroll, they would have succeeded in bankrupting the place. So this has been going on for at least 40 years, at least. And it's time to address that. So there are a lot of things that need to be addressed.
I did want to say we've gotten into a kind of culture crisis, which Ratzinger defined, Pope Benedict, as the totalitarianism of relativism, which means that the one thing that's not accepted is a claim that something is true. Everything is relative. In other words, relativism is the worldview that dominates. And so anyone who says Jesus Christ is Lord and there's no other Lord who has been provided by God by whom men can be saved, that's bigoted. It doesn't allow for the
that's bigoted only if you're not thinking, if you're not a straight thinker. That is the dictatorship of relativism. What the church has got to say, we have to say that there is a truth.
Yeah.
If we don't announce that there's a truth and his name is Jesus Christ, what in the world do we exist for?
Right. But the whole world that we're in now says if you do that, you're evil.
Let it. Right. This is what I'm saying, because here's the deal. If we're with the world and the world loves us, just as the Freemason expressed their admiration for the late pontiff, there's something wrong with us. We're not doing something right. The world is not supposed to love us, and we are not supposed to love the values of the world. We love the world as it is the theater of redemption, and we love fellow human beings, yes. But to get them on the right path, we don't swallow the world's lack of values and lack of direction, lack of everything else that they call relativism. That we don't do that. We have a position, and if we don't have the position, we should close the doors.
Okay, so I think that's going to be the characteristic that the cardinals should look for, because that's the central battle of our time. And I think
they have to.
And on the political side, we've felt that we've headed into a kind of miasma where our children are taught that they can take any position about any matter. And this hinges the success or failure of an attempt to retake a kind of sanity and common sense in our culture depends in part on this coming election of the next pope.
It does, and I think that the men who are involved in this election are already seeing signs of the times. The Second Vatican Council asked us to be very on the lookout for signs of the times. And one of the signs of these times is that clarity is returning. We have Supreme Court decision, even just the other day in England, finally defining what a woman is. You can imagine. I mean, we're getting there. We're getting there. It's a long process. We're so fouled up that it's going to take a long time to get back to it. But people are sick and tired of ambiguity. They really are. They want truth. Now, you can either accept the truth or not accept it. That's up to you. But it has to be the job of the Catholic Church to be presenting it.
Yeah. Okay. I did hear from a dear friend who is an official in the Vatican who said, you know, a man that many people really respect and love is Cardinal Sarah, Robert Sarah from West Africa. And then I sat down in a restaurant and I ran into two laymen from Senegal, which is Cardinal Sarah's from Guinea-Bissau, but next country. But they said, we really respect him. He's 79.
Everyone respects him. Everyone respects him.
He turns 80 on June 15th. And on his 79th birthday, he was in our office in America, and we celebrated his birthday party.
Great. No, listen, I don't want to say, get into who would be best, but I'm going to tell you something. It would restore my faith in a lot of things to see such a man take the chair of Peter.
And the entire African church, I must say, seems to be a reservoir of sanity in many ways.
Yes.
And
because they have not swallowed whole all of our lack of values. They have not done that. They've kept their sanity.
Yeah, we've gone insane. Okay. So the one other person I met in a restaurant said, you know, you have a wonderful cardinal in America, but maybe you won't realize that for us Italians, he seems Italian. And I said, who's that? He said, well, that's the Franciscan from Boston, O'Malley. He said, to us, he seems like another Padre Pio. We would be delighted to have such an American here in Rome. And O'Malley is 80.
You remember Cardinal Tisserone?
Yeah.
Was a very sarcastic Frenchman.
Yeah.
Very intelligent. But someone asked him, a reporter from Time magazine in the day asked him what the possibility of having an American Pope would be. And Tisserone went, he said, almost impossible. He said, although it would be very interesting to see a man guessing infallibly.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think he worked with the French military espionage in Middle East before.
Yes, he did. He did. He was a tough cookie.
Also, his papers were not taken in by the Vatican. They're somewhere in Switzerland. In addition to
Robert, I've got to be somewhere in Switzerland real soon.
Okay.
I've got to abandon you.
The last thing I want to say, I just spoke to my Russian friend. He said the last time he met with Pope Francis told him he was going to this year make a cardinal of one of the Catholic bishops in Russia. And I always thought if there were a Russian cardinal and he came to a conclave, that would add another interesting element.
We'd have the shoes of the fisherman.
Yeah. But the Pope has passed away evidently without making any Russian cardinal. All right.
God love you, sir. These are interesting times, and no one is to lose faith and hope. No one.
Amen. Amen. Everyone, thank you for coming. Join us next week. We'll be back.
Pax.
Peace.
Come with us on a unique pilgrimage and retreat to renew your spirit. Experience the beauty and richness of southern Spain. Our retreat master, Father Charles T. Murr, a renowned Catholic priest, best-selling author, philosopher, theologian, trained psychologist, and pastor of souls. Father Murr will guide us through 3 mornings of spiritual reflections at a convent located in the historic heart of Carmona, Spain, promising a transformative journey. Experience an intimate evening with Father Murr at his home. Wine, dinner, music, and conversation, a highlight of this unique experience. Explore picturesque towns in Andalusia, each with its own history and charm. From the ancient streets of Carmona to the majestic beauty of Cordoba, the breathtaking views of Ronda, the remarkable village of Centenil, and the historic wonders of Seville. Our pilgrimage will be filled with awe-inspiring moments. Join us on this profound spiritual journey and rediscover the joy of faith, fellowship, and renewal. Book your place now and embark on a pilgrimage and retreat unlike any other.